Namaste and welcome to our channel, where we explore the timeless wisdom of Vedic traditions. Today, we address a topic of significant debate in Hindu communities worldwide. Can women serve as priests according to authentic Vedic tradition? What do the Shastras actually say about women performing rituals, receiving sacred mantras, and conducting ceremonies? In recent years, we've seen more women taking on priestly roles in India and abroad. In 2021, a 900-year-old temple in Maharashtra's Pandharpur appointed a female priest, breaking centuries of tradition. In the UK, several Hindu temples now have female priests leading ceremonies. But are these developments in harmony with or contrary to scriptural authority? This is not a simple question to answer, as Hindu traditions span thousands of years and encompass diverse texts, schools, and interpretations. To approach this topic with intellectual integrity, we must distinguish between what the original scriptures prescribe, how these teachings were interpreted over time, and the practical adaptations we see today. Our exploration is not about making judgments, but understanding the textual basis for traditional practices. Let's dive deeper into what the Shastras say about women's ritual roles, ritual purity, and the significance of biological differences in a spiritual context. The status of women in Hindu traditions has not been static, but has evolved over millennia. Early Vedic literature suggests women had more prominent ritual roles than in later periods. The Rig Veda mentions female seers or rishikas such as Lopamudra, Ghosha, Apala, and Vishvavara, who composed hymns that remain part of the Vedic corpus. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we find Gargi Vachaknavi engaging in philosophical debates with sage Yajnavalkya, demonstrating women's participation in spiritual discourse. Some lesser-known texts like the Yamasmriti state, performing the thread ceremony for young girls, studying Vedas and recitation of Gayatri mantra was allowed in ancient times. The Harit Smriti similarly mentions Brahmin women have the right to a sacred thread ceremony, a fire ceremony, the study of Vedas, and a right to sacred begging. However, by the post-Vedic period, particularly with the codification of the Dharma Shastras, women's ritual roles became more restricted. The Manusmriti, composed between 200 BCE and 200 CE, presents a more limited view of women's religious authority, stating, "Women have no separate right to the employment of the means of realizing the three ends of spiritual merit, wealth, and pleasure." This historical trajectory suggests that restrictions on women's ritual roles were not necessarily inherent to the earliest Vedic tradition, but developed over time as social structures evolved. Let's examine what specific texts say about women's roles as priests or ritual specialists. Manusmriti 9.18 states, "For women, no sacramental rite is performed with sacred texts. Thus the law is settled. Women who are destitute of strength and destitute of the knowledge of Vedic texts are as impure as falsehood itself. That is a fixed rule." Similarly, Manusmriti 9.96 adds, "As the man is to whom a woman cleaves, so is the son whom she brings forth. Let her perform the rites with concentrated mind." While the Shastras extensively discuss menstruation-related impurity, they also address other bodily discharges. According to the Dharma Shastra concept of ritual purity, the upanayana, downward-moving energy, is considered incompatible with spiritual practices, regardless of whether a woman is menstruating. The Vedadhara text explains, "Apana is a force that exists in the navel and is responsible for forces of rejection in a downward direction." This includes not only menstruation, but also elimination of feces, urine, and other bodily discharges. Since vaginal discharges involve this downward-moving energy, they are similarly viewed as creating a state of temporary ritual impurity. From an Ayurvedic perspective, vaginal discharges are influenced by various factors including Vata and Pitta, which affect one's energetic state for ritual performance. While not specifically addressing non-menstrual discharge, this framework suggests that all bodily fluids involving upanayana create ritual considerations. The Yajnavalkya Smriti echoes these restrictions, noting that wives should act according to their husband's direction, which it considers the highest duty of a wife. The prohibitions stem from several principles found in the Dharma texts. First, there's the concept of spiritual authority being tied to formal Vedic education, which traditionally required upanayana, sacred thread ceremony. Second, many ritual roles require maintenance of the sacred fire, Agnihotra, which was traditionally the responsibility of a householder who had undergone upanayana. Third, the Dharma texts emphasize different duties, Svadharma, for different varnas and genders, based on the principle that spiritual progress comes through fulfilling one's designated role rather than taking on others' responsibilities. Central to the question of women's ritual authority is the upanayana or sacred thread ceremony. Traditionally, this initiation marks the beginning of formal Vedic education and confers the right to perform certain rituals. According to mainstream tradition, this ceremony is reserved for males of the top three varnas, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya. However, some texts suggest this wasn't always the case. The Harita Smriti mentions two categories of women. There are two types of women, Brahmavadini and Sadyavadu. The former has the ceremonies of upanayana and Vedic studies and begging alms in her own house. Similarly, the Yama Smriti, also called Manu Smriti Parashishta, states, in ancient times, girls were also invested with the sacred grass girdle, educated in Vedas and recitation of the Gayatri. So why did the practice of women's upanayana disappear? Several theories exist. First, the focus on women's roles shifted toward household management and child-rearing, with spiritual practices oriented around these responsibilities. Second, as social structures became more patriarchal, religious authority became increasingly concentrated in male lineages. Third, concerns about ritual purity related to menstruation may have complicated women's performance of daily fire rituals required after upanayana. Whatever the historical reasons, it's important to note that the absence of upanayana doesn't imply spiritual inferiority, but rather a different spiritual path with its own merits and challenges. According to Manusmriti, verse 11.36, there is no possibility for a woman ever acting as a priest in the context of Agnihotra rituals, establishing a clear prohibition in one of Hinduism's foundational dharma texts. The traditional rationale extends beyond mere discrimination, as explained in the Mithri Speaks commentary on Garuda Purana, which states that mantras recited as part of the rituals carry the sankalpa of moksha for the jiva. And for women of menstruating age, such mantras are traditionally restricted because they cause the elevation of prana towards the higher chakras, resulting in inversion of the downward-moving apanavayu, which is crucial for menstrual and reproductive processes. This energetic concern is further elaborated with the warning that when women of menstrual age are exposed to moksha mantras, it could throw their menstrual cycles out of order. One of the most significant considerations in discussions about women's ritual roles is menstruation and its implications for ritual purity. This is often misunderstood as simple discrimination, but the scriptural perspective is more nuanced. According to the Vashishta Dharma Sutra, a woman in her courses will be ashuchi, impure, during 3 days and nights. This temporary state of ritual impurity, ashaucha, applies to menstruating women, but importantly, the Baudhayana Dharma Sutra adds that the uncleanness is only temporary. The Garuda Purana Predakanda 32.7-10 emphasizes, the first 4 days of menstrual flow of blood shall be avoided when the sin of a Brahman's slaughter resides in her. A woman becomes pure on the 4th day. After 7 days, she becomes pure enough to take part in the worship of the ancestors and deities. This indicates ritual restrictions extending beyond the actual menstruation period. Far from being a punishment, menstruation is actually described in some texts as a natural purification process. The Anjurasa Smriti, verse 42, explicitly states that women become purified due to menstruation. The Baudhayana Dharma Sutra further explains, women possess an unrivaled means of purification. They never become entirely impure. For month by month, their temporary uncleanness removes their sins. This is a crucial point often overlooked in modern discussions. While men must perform various samskaras, mantras, and rituals to attain purification, women are understood to undergo natural purification through menstruation. The restrictions during menstruation, avoiding temple visits, ritual performance, or touching sacred items, are not about women being inherently impure, but about respecting the energetic process occurring during this time. From an Ayurvedic perspective, menstruation involves a downward energy flow, apanavayu, while ritual worship involves an upward energy flow. These opposing energetic currents are considered incompatible during worship. Additionally, the elevated rajasic nature of the body during menstruation is considered unsuitable for ritual practices requiring sattvic qualities. This is a matter of temporary energetic states, not inherent capacity or worth. Based on the traditional restrictions we've explored, can women perform homams, fire ceremonies, and samskaras, life cycle rituals, according to the Shastras? The orthodox position holds that full Vedic rituals requiring mantras from the Shruti, revealed texts like the Vedas, traditionally require the performer to have undergone upanayana. Since women traditionally did not receive upanayana, they would not be qualified to perform these rituals as primary priests. First, women have always participated in household rituals alongside their husbands. The wife is considered an essential participant in grihastha, householder, rituals, often referred to as sahadharmini or ritual partner. Second, certain rituals and worship practices from the Smriti and Puranic traditions, as opposed to strictly Vedic Shruti traditions, have fewer restrictions. Women have historically led many forms of devotional worship, particularly in Shakta and Bhakti traditions. Third, the distinction between who can perform a ritual and who can benefit from it is important. While traditional texts may restrict who can serve as the ritual priest, they don't suggest women receive fewer spiritual benefits from the rituals performed. Fourth, some sampradayas, lineages, have their own interpretations that may differ from mainstream Smriti texts. In certain Shakta and Tantric traditions, women not only participate in but sometimes lead ritual worship. Finally, we must acknowledge the difference between nitya karma, daily obligatory rituals, and naimitika karma, occasional rituals. The restrictions are generally stricter for the former than the latter. Another aspect of our exploration concerns the different mantras and initiations traditionally given to men and women. Are these differences arbitrary, or is there a deeper logic? According to traditional explanations, mantras are precise sound formulas that create specific energetic effects. Different mantras are prescribed based on constitution, purpose, and capacity, not simply based on gender hierarchy. The Vedic tradition understands that male and female bodies have different energy patterns. For example, certain tantric and yogic texts describe different paths for the movement of prana, life force, in male and female bodies. This understanding extends to the subtle effects of mantras. Some mantras are believed to activate energies that harmonize better with typical male energy patterns, while others work better with typical female energy patterns. Additionally, mantras are often connected to specific responsibilities and roles. Since traditional society assigned different dharmic duties to men and women, their mantras naturally differed as well. It's important to note that in the Bhakti tradition, many of these distinctions become less relevant. The great saints of the Bhakti movement emphasize that divine names and mantras like the Hare Krishna Mahamantra or Ram Nam are equally powerful for everyone regardless of gender, caste, or other distinctions. This suggests that the differences in mantra initiation are not about spiritual capacity, but about optimizing specific energy patterns for specific contexts and purposes. It's crucial to understand that the traditional differentiation of roles between men and women in Vedic traditions isn't fundamentally about hierarchy, but about complementarity and balance. This is evident in how the tradition views the divine itself. Hinduism is perhaps unique among world religions in giving equal prominence to the divine feminine. Goddesses like Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati are not subordinate figures, but represent supreme divine power, abundance, and wisdom. At the human level, the complementarity is expressed in the concept of dampati, the husband and wife as joint ritual participants. While the husband might lead certain aspects of ritual, the wife's presence and participation are often essential for the ritual's completion and efficacy. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad uses the imagery of two halves of a split pea to describe the relationship between husband and wife, suggesting completion rather than hierarchy. The tradition also recognizes exceptional women who transcended conventional roles. From Vedic Rishikas to medieval saints like Andal, Mirabai, and Laleshwari, women have attained the highest spiritual realizations and authored texts that remain central to Hindu spirituality. Today, we're witnessing significant changes in women's ritual roles across Hindu communities worldwide. In India, Scholars estimate there are around 1,600 women priests, with approximately 600 in Maharashtra alone. Organizations like Pune Basti have been training women to conduct rituals, prayers, and ceremonies for the past several years. These women learn Sanskrit and memorize verses from ancient texts necessary for conducting ceremonies. In the UK and other Western countries, some Hindu temples have appointed female priests to meet community needs and reflect changing social norms. Some traditionalists argue that these adaptations, while well-intentioned, deviate from authentic Shastra-based practice and represent a concession to contemporary values rather than fidelity to tradition. A middle path recognizes that Hinduism has always balanced eternal principles, Sanatana Dharma, with contextual applications, Yuga Dharma. As society evolves, certain applications may change while core principles remain. From this perspective, the question is not simply whether women served as priests in ancient times, but whether contemporary adaptations serve the essential spiritual purposes of the tradition while responding to legitimate current needs. As we conclude our exploration, it's clear that the question of women as priests in Hindu tradition is nuanced and multifaceted. The scriptural evidence suggests that while traditional texts do contain restrictions on women's ritual roles, particularly regarding Vedic rituals requiring upanayana, these restrictions weren't universal across all periods or all forms of Hindu worship. The underlying principles relate not to inherent spiritual capacity, but to considerations of ritual purity, energetic compatibility, and the traditional division of dharmic responsibilities. Whether traditional restrictions should apply in our current age is a question each sampradaya and community must address based on their understanding of Shastra, tradition, and contemporary needs. What remains essential is approaching these questions with sincerity, respect for tradition, and genuine concern for preserving spiritual authenticity while responding to legitimate contemporary needs. The diversity within Hindu tradition itself, from strict adherence to Vedic prescriptions to Bhakti's emphasis on devotion transcending external distinctions, offers multiple authentic paths forward. Rather than imposing either rigid traditionalism or uncritical modernism, the wisest approach may be to understand the deeper principles behind traditional practices while thoughtfully considering how best to apply them in our time. Thank you for joining us for this exploration. We hope it has provided deeper insight into this complex and important topic. Om Shanti.